Diolch. Wel, bore da, good morning, croeso and welcome to this session of Democratic Services Committee on a Monday morning. Have we got any apologies, Carol?
Yes, Chair, Councillor Angela Davis.
Thank you very much. Okay, minutes of the previous meeting. Would anybody, you've had an opportunity to have a look over them, would anybody wish to propose that they are a reflection of that meeting? Can I have a proposer and seconder? Yeah, thank you, Danny. Any seconder? Anybody indicate? Thank you, Councillor Pete. There we are. Okay, thank you. Have we got any declarations of interest? Well, I don't think we've only got one item on the agenda, so I think it's fairly straightforward, I would have thought, I assume, and I stand to be corrected, of course. And if that's the case, therefore, we will go to the substance of the meeting, which is the matter to do with Constitution, and specifically to do with elements to do with motions, etc. And over to you, Clive. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Good morning, members. Thank you for attending this morning. A short paper, really, dealing with a couple of issues for clarification of the Constitution, some of which arose out of questioning from councillors at a recent member development session. So this is a timely reminder to bring these issues before DSC today, so that they can be considered subsequently at full council. Chair, you'll see that from the report before you that the first issue is the issue about the text of and the length of preambles to motions. Chair, you'll see that the average number of words used in those preambles since July 2022 is 510 words. And you'll have also seen from the table, which is set out in 2.1 of the report, that we have two motions where the preambles were over 1,000 words. And if members cast their minds back, they will recall that at a recent meeting, that there was a preamble which lasted several pages. Chair, the issue about preambles is they don't form part of the motion, so they cannot be amended as such. But of course, they can contain lots of controversial things which members would want to amend. But when they try to, we don't allow it because it doesn't form part of the motion. Members must remember that at the last meeting of council, that council did agree that the time for speaking at motions is 5 minutes for proposers and 3 minutes for everybody else. And it's just to take a steer to council from DSC as to whether or not we feel that there should be or should not be, because this is an issue for members themselves, whether there should be a limit on the amount of wordage which can be contained in a preamble. Members, I'm going to just leave for debate. Let's see what members think.
Thank you, Clive. Perhaps I should apologise first of all for the last long, lengthy preamble on March. That's another point.
No apology needed, Chair. As they currently stands, yeah, they are absolutely fine.
Yeah,
but there is an issue.
Yes, I appreciate it. Councillor Graham and then Councillor Pete.
Yeah, thank you, Chair, and thank you, Clive, for explaining the reason for this paper that's before us. I think it's important to point out that two motions there absolutely skew the average, don't they?
They do.
You know, the rest are, apart from the 500 one, are fairly acceptable, I would have thought. Now, I am concerned about constraints being placed on this, because I do feel that councillors are getting fewer and fewer opportunities to actually speak at council meetings. It's a matter that several councillors have raised with me, that they feel that they're no longer part of many of the processes that are taking place. So I would ask that we give this, a lot of consideration before placing a restriction on it. And after that, I'll leave that open to the rest of the floor to discuss. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Graham. Councillor Pete.
All right. Yeah, thank you, Chair. Yeah, I understand the sentiments, and and the underlying reasons behind this. And I would also echo some of Councillor Graham's comments there as well. For me, I think you need as many words as necessary to explain the motion, and I wouldn't really want to set targets or limits on it. I think the preamble, I think you have to assume that councillors have read it, and it really is required information. And I guess in a way, for me, it could possibly save some unnecessary questions relating to lack of information as the motion gets debated. So I think it more be, for me, maybe more about asking councillors to perhaps be a bit more to the point and to include relevant information when we're setting the preamble. But I really wouldn't want to impose any limits. I wouldn't know what the right number of words would be anyway. So yeah.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Danny.
Thank you, Chair. I'm pretty much echoing the same. I think if we did impose a limit, it would need to be quite high because certain subjects need that amount of information to be given. Yeah, that's my thoughts on it, really.
Okay,
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Anybody else with any thoughts or comments? Well, there seems to be a consistent pattern there, Clive, of views. As you say, there is quite a range of figures there relating to preamble. So, as has been noted, there's only two really that skew the rest. Is that sufficient for you?
Well, there's been no proposal to amend, Chair, and therefore the current status quo remains. And I'm happy with that. But I hope that you members thought it was the right thing to bring the matter for discussion by DSC.
Yeah. It's been flagged up, and if it continues to be an issue, then of course we can sort it out or look at it again in the future. Thank you very much. Okay, the next element, therefore.
Thank you, Chair. During the course of a recent member development session, which I did on motions, etc., Councillor Ian McIntosh asked a really question about, well, how many motions can a councillor second? Because under the Constitution, Rule 441, a councillor can only put forward 2 motions at any meeting. And I had to admit to Councillor Ian at that stage that the Constitution is silent on the issue of how many motions you can second. And I undertook then to bring the matter before DSC. So, Chair, as I said, that's the issue. If you are limited to being able to propose 2 motions per meeting, should you be limited to the number of motions that you can second? And that's the issue which I asked for members to consider this morning.
Thank you very much. I must say, on face value, it seems to make sense. But Councillor Peat.
Yeah, thanks, Joe. Yeah, just a quick one, I suppose. It just raises the question in my mind: why? What would be the logic for limiting you to 2 beyond the fact you can only propose 2? What's the issue? What's the problem?
In theory, there is no problem, but of course it was raised by Councillor Ian McIntosh, and when it's raised by a member, one has to deal with it. And I think the logicality, Councillor Peat, is that if you can only propose 2, perhaps you should only be able to second 2.
Yeah, I think it's consistency. I think the message. I think that's the thrust of the question. I think, isn't it?
Okay.
Councillor David.
Yeah, I totally agree, Chair. I think it makes sense to amend it to that, and I propose that we do.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Danny.
Thank you, Chair. I do think that it does make an easy rule to follow for the Chair. Well, anyone to pick out that, during the council meetings, that it's that yeah, you've got that figure. That's it. It's a clear, precise, statement to make. I think it's a good idea.
Thank you very much. Councillor Kelly.
Yeah, I just think that we need to be consistent, so it does make sense to do that as well.
Okay, thank you very much. Does either of you? There's been a proposer. Does either of you want to second the proposal?
I'd
Sorry.
be happy to second.
Okay, thank you very much. And Councillor Pete. Did I?
Yeah.
No, sorry,
Yeah, sorry,
no.
Owen, sorry, that was me confusing.
Yeah,
you,
sorry,
Rob.
no. There was something. No, people are flying around the screen. You couldn't catch up. Okay, we have a proposer and a seconder. Therefore, those that are in favour of that proposal. Yeah. Okay. Well, I can see 5 at least. Anyway, anybody against? No. And any abstentions? No. Okay, well, that's been passed therefore. And therefore, the costed analysis for urgent motions is next part, I think, isn't it?
Yes, thank you, Chair. Members will have seen from paragraph 4, clause 4 of the report, that Rule 437(1) of the Constitution provides for urgent motions to be made available, provided that there are certain limits to them to start with, but provided the criteria are met. One of it is that they have to be received by the monitoring officer 5 p.m. before the day of the meeting. Now, elsewhere in the Constitution, of course, we have a requirement for motions to be have a cost analysis attached to them, and if something is brought forward, an urgent motion, I mean, is brought forward so late in the day, namely before 5 o'clock the day, there is a real risk that such a motion would not have any cost analysis to it. So, Chair, the issue for Council this morning is whether or not we think that it is appropriate that for urgent motions which are really urgent, and there's a criteria for setting that, that's not the matter for debate this morning. If urgent motions are required, that we give dispensation for a cost analysis to be avoided. So that's the issue for this morning.
Okay, thank you very much. Members, any comments, observations? Councillor Pete.
Yeah, thanks, Jack. Yeah, just a quick one. I suppose being a new councillor, I didn't know, Clive, whether there's an example of, say, a previous urgent motion, just to sort of bring this alive a bit more for me.
Well, Councillor Pete, I can't give you an example because we don't have very urgent motions, but basically urgent motions may be available in circumstances where something develops between the normal date for delivery of a motion and the date of a meeting. So something crops up very urgently, which may require the attention of council. That's basically what the criteria are. And it can be anything, you know. It could be a new government initiative or something of that nature. It may be an event which happens, which needs to be discussed in council. The circumstances are really dependent upon the circumstances of what happens. But the issue is that there's this disparity between should such a motion have a cost analysis attached to it, even though it's urgent, or not, and you know, it's for members to decide that.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Danny.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, it's one of them things we need to know about how urgent it would be. Like if it was something that was like a major emergency, you know, life-threatening issues, things like that. Yes, I believe things have to go on, but on the other hand, it's perception of an emergency, really, is what I'm trying to say, I suppose. I think that we ought to keep an eye on costs, otherwise it leaves free rein for a lot of things. You know what I mean? It's it could get abused. You know, it's like endless cost, possibly.
Councillor Danny, if I could just come back to you on the issue of urgency. As I said, it really has to be urgent, something which has developed between the date when a motion should normally be submitted and the date of a council meeting, and it has to be urgent. In other words, that it can't be delayed to another. It's not just it be convenient to deal with it. It has to be something which should be dealt with, and the decision about whether or not it is really urgent is one for the chair of council only. So the chair, if the chair says it's urgent, it is urgent.
Yeah.
And in those circumstances, the question is, well, do our normal rules apply with regard to having a cost analysis, which, for something which could be brought, but literally hours before the start of a council meeting, that could very well be difficult. In some circumstances, it won't be difficult, but it could be.
Yeah, it's something really then that's got to be governed on a like a day-to-day basis, if you know what I mean. In my eyes, like we've got to accept that some things just have to go on, and that's it. Sometimes it's just out of our hands, isn't it? So I'm divided on this one, I must say, but yeah, I don't know. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Graham.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I'm happy with this one, provided the decision is made by the chair. And I think that's the important aspect of this. Someone has to make a decision whether it's urgent or not. And this clearly says that it's the decision of the chair. And so I'm more than happy with that.
Okay, fine. Thank you, Arch.
I'm happy to propose.
Thank you, Arch. And Councillor Kelly.
Yeah, I'm also the same. If it's urgent and the chair agrees it's urgent, then I'm happy as well.
Okay, thank you. And are you, can I therefore ask you, are you seconding the motion?
Yes.
Thank you much. Any other comments or observations?
Chair, I should just indicate that if members wish to proceed with this, the proposed amendment, the amended wording is set out in paragraph 4.4 of the report. So basically what you're looking at is the wording in paragraph 4.4.
So if you've got it all in front of you. The committee decides that the requirement for cost analysis should be excluded for urgent motions. Committee is asked to consider the following suggestion. For avoidance of doubt, an urgent motion does not need to be accompanied by a costed analysis of financial and resource implications of that motion.
Thank you, Chair.
Okay, all in favour, therefore, or as suggested. Councillor Pete, do you want to come in? Sorry.
No, sorry.
Oh, sorry. No.
I've got my hand, Elwyn. Sorry.
Okay, thank you much. All those in favour, therefore. Okay, I think that is everybody, isn't it?
It is.
Okay, great. Therefore, thank you much. That's passed. And finally, therefore, amendment to motions.
Chair, no, this is something which we have, I think, in the previous council dealt with or had an experience of an anomaly, a potential anomaly within the Constitution itself. So members will have seen from paragraph 5 of the report that members can put in amendments to leave words out, to add words or phrases, or add additional recommendations. If you do so, the Constitution says that you can do that, provided that, and I quote the words, those additional words or recommendations, or taking out of those words or recommendations, does not negate or otherwise change the material substance of the original motion. So it's clear that, if you just simply disagree with a motion, what you should be doing is voting it down, rather than trying to amend it. So that's the objective of that wording. But Chair, the Constitution as presently drafted also contains in Rule 449.15 the ability of members to substitute another proposition. And as drafted, if you substitute another proposition, there is no restriction upon not negating or otherwise materially changing the original motion. So there is this conflict. We've had experience about it in the past, and Chair, I thought that because we're dealing with Section 4 of the Constitution, we should probably discuss it now. And members will see from paragraph 5.4 of the report that officers thought that there are really 3 options available for consideration by DSC and by full council, should DSC recommend one of them to full council. So the first option is to remove Rule 49(1)(5) from the Constitution. In other words, that you can no longer substitute a proposition which could negate or materially alter the substance of the original motion. So you could take it out, and that avoids any discrepancy between the Constitution at all. Alternatively, you can retain 49(1)(5) so that members can put in an alternative proposition. But Chair, that in itself causes some difficulty, because Rule 449(1)(5), and you'll see this at the bottom of page 12, says that such an alternative proposition can be presented to me no later than 5 p.m. on the day prior to a meeting. Of course, that begs into question, well, if you're producing it at 5 p.m. on the day before a meeting, how can a cost analysis be produced? So option 2 is that you retain the ability to put in an alternative recommendation, but to require the cost analysis to have been received at least 2 days prior to the council meeting itself in order to comply with our cost analysis rules. And alternatively, members, the alternative would be to keep the opportunity to put in a substitute proposition, but to exclude, in these circumstances, the need for a cost analysis. Now, you've just excluded the cost analysis for an urgent motion, but an alternative proposition, is it something of the same kind or not? So those are the 3 options which probably are available to members. And happy to have a discussion.
Yeah, thank you. Right, over to you, members. You've got various options there. It's a tidying up exercise and trying to have elements of consistency. What are your views? If any. It's Councillor Sarah.
Morning, everyone. I just think this is where it gets really confusing in council, when people start changing words and slightly altering the motion. We don't know half the time whether we're voting for the original or an amended, and then we vote for the amendment. And anyway, it just, and I don't think I'm the only one in finding it. I can read perfectly what you're trying to say now, but on the day when they're trying to change words in a motion, is not quite clear to people, and sometimes you've got double negatives, and it just really throws you. And so for me, I don't think we should be changing the words at such a short notice. But I don't know. It's really, I don't know.
So do you favour one of those options in particular?
Well, for the cost, I think that if we're saying, I know we've just agreed to not having a cost implication for an urgent motion, but for this, it's not an urgent motion, is it? So I think we should stick with the cost implications being necessary, which would put the 2-day in, if that's enough. And even 2 days doesn't seem to be a lot for officers to get. It depends how lengthy and how in-depth the motion is. There could be a lot of work. I can see Clive is wanting to say.
Yeah, thank you, Councillor Sarah. If I could just clarify, it's not 2 days and then the cost analysis is done after that. The person who makes an amendment, adding words or whatever, should be in contact with a Section 1.5 officer well before that 2-day period, okay, so that the cost analysis is done before that 2-day period, and it can then be presented to members in advance, 2 days in advance, so they can see the clear implications of it. So it's not 2 days and the analysis after that. It's 2 days with the analysis having been done before.
Okay, thank you much. Thank you for that. Okay, therefore, Councillor Danny.
Thank you. I was trying to read this a few days ago and I just confused myself that much with it. It was like trying to read binary code or something. I don't know.
Oh,
And to be honest, Clive explained it very well, but I'm still almost as confused now. I don't know which way to go with this one.
Chair, can I try and explain it in another way then? Okay.
Thank
So
you.
for most amendments, you want to add something in, take a word out, yeah.
Yeah.
And in those circumstances, such amendments cannot negate the original motion, right? On the basis that if you don't like the motion, what you should be doing is voting against it. Okay, so that's the reason for that. For those additional words, or for the omission of words or phrases, you still have to put those amendments in at least 2 days before it and have it accompanied by a costs analysis. All right.
Yep.
So that way, members have at least 2 days before the meeting, which they can see what the amendment is, and they can see the financial implications of that. So that at the meeting itself, you should be able to say, well, yes, we agree with the amendment or not. What this is not about, it's not about attempts at the day of the motion to put in additional words or amendments, because you can only do that if they arise out of the substance of the debate, and secondly, that they don't negate the original intention of the motion. Okay, so it's not about things which have been done from the floor, because we've avoided that by putting the 2-day rule in. This rule 449.15 is perhaps, and I say perhaps, it predates me, so I'm not sure why it was put in, but we've continued to keep it in because it predated my involvement in the council. So 449 allows an individual to put in an alternative, a substitute proposition, and allows them to do it 5 p.m. before the meeting. Now, that goes contrary to everything that council has been saying about motions must be properly costed. So, as I said, we thought long and hard about this when we thought what the options were, and they are set out in paragraph 514. So I hope that sort of explained it for you, Councillor Danny.
Yeah, sort of. Yeah, well, thanks for that. Yeah, I don't think I could make a decision on any of them options really. And maybe it's just I say I'm too new to the job. I'm certainly new to someone like yourself. But yeah, it's. Do you have a gut feeling of what works best for yourself?
If members are asking me for my recommendation, I would withdraw it. I would take it out. But it's not my decision. That's why I put the 3 options before you.
Right. Okay. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Peat.
Thanks, Chair. Yeah, I wholeheartedly agree with Councillor Danny. Actually, I've read this many times, and I've listened to Clive as well there, and I'm still confused. And I guess it would be a good example of I know it's all technical, but of trying to get it into plain English. But then the thing is, when I look at 449.1, it says an amendment to a motion must be relevant to the motion. So I know we could argue about what the word relevant actually means, but therefore I don't know if you're substituting another proposition, how that could be relevant to the motion. So I think I would be advocating option 1 and getting rid of 491.5.
Thank you, Councillor Peat. We have had one instance where this did happen, and the alternative proposition was relevant to the motion, but totally was contradictory to the original motion. And it's for that reason that if members were asking my opinion, I think we should get rid of 449.15. But there are 3 options, and I have to put all options before members.
Thank you. Councillor Peat, were you proposing that? No?
Yes, Chair, I would be happy to propose option 1.
Okay, Thank you very much. Have we got a seconder to that view? No? Councillor Kelly.
Yeah, just seconding it.
Okay, thank you very much. And we notice Councillor Hyland's had IT issues. Thank you, Hylwyn. Right, we have a mover and a seconder for that view. All those therefore that are in favour of that motion. Okay, 4, 7, 8, I think, is it?
The only one I can't see, Chair, is Councillor Hylwyn.
Yes, and she has having connectivity issues. Anybody against the motion? And any many abstentions, not amendments. Be quite ironic. Any abstentions? No. Okay, fine. Well, that's been passed, therefore. Okay, that is all on the documents and all the report, as I understand it. Anything else, Clive?
No, thank you, Chair. Thank you, members, for as you know, the Constitution is a living document. Really, we keep amending it because we see anomalies, and all we try to do is make it as good as we possibly can. So,
yes.
So thank you ever so much for your consideration this morning.
Great, diolch yn fawr. Thank you all for your attendance. And
Apologies, Chair, for being late. I had IT issues.
no problem.
Rooms. It's wet weather up here and the internet goes all to pot.
The joys of house.
Could you possibly stay on for a minute for a quick chat?
Yeah, I'll give you a bell, Gray.
Oh, okay, right, so thanks.
Great, thank you much. Morning
Yeah.
all. Diolch yn fawr.
Thank you.
Bye.
Goodbye.
Thank you, members.
Thank you.
Thanks, bye.